You're by 10 o'clock, ready to start the meeting. We'll start and ask the Chief Executive to read the statement in relation to the video of the meeting.
Thanks very much, Chair. This is to remind members that we record our meetings and therefore the recording will be on the website and therefore can be seen multiple times. So if people do not wish to have the involved in the recording of it, you will have to take the website to go and take it that way. The meeting will be recorded as do the will.
Right, thank you. I understand this would have been Jim Johnson's last meeting. We'd like to record the thanks of the board for his aid as a service to the board and acknowledge because for us to work in a proper fashion for the health service at the time. Thank you. Agenda item 1.
Your agenda one this morning's apologies. We had apologies this morning from Maureen Devlin, but we have Councillor Markey with us. Mike Pate, but we have Councillor Laughrin on line with us. Andrew Walters, Jenna Dixon, Edmund Ack, Councillor Andrews, and Councillor O'Donnell. Jenna Dixon as well. Any other apologies this morning? No, thank you.
So before we go into agenda item 2, there may be difficulties this morning with the IT system. So I will check that those online can actually hear this.
Because of the event for that.
Can we check that those online can hear us?
Give us a thumbs up. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next agenda item, please.
Next agenda is any declarations of interest this morning? No,
It's on.
just press the button.
Chair, I'm still advising North Ayrshire Council on the sustainability transport plan for Ireland and Cumbria.
Chair, just as an employee of Scotland and the member of ASLEF.
Other declarations? No, thank you.
Okay. Right, next agenda item is minutes of the previous meeting. Executive.
This is a meeting of the 24th of June, which was our first and second meeting after a minutes meeting. You will note that the note there is about the technical issues that we had, and future members of the I'll add a little annotation to show which members were in virtual and which members were in person. So I'll do that if the meeting is agreeable to that. Other than that, the minutes there for accuracy, and I accept it as an accurate record.
Sorry, Chair, can I maybe just ask that it actually highlights that it was a whole meeting for someone who was in line that day. It wasn't just the end that was happy item that we felt could be involved. It was very sporadic throughout, and I didn't really feel like any part of the meeting at all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that.
Is that accurate?
No other points? Here, okay, the minute. Right,
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, is it at all possible to have a bit more detail in the minutes? Just because I know that there have been quite extensive conversations, questions, etc., and deliberations, but they don't really reflect the minutes, don't really reflect the fullness of that.
It's regional minutes. There's actually a detail which I'll share with you about 30 minutes, as we always do. We shared it at the last partnership as well. We don't minute who said what, because that is very difficult to do. We don't minute a verbatim, but we do minute the text, the general themes of the meeting. So I'll happily look at whether we can expand it slightly, because otherwise it sometimes repeats the report, which is also there. So I'll have a look at how we can maybe expand it without going into huge amounts of detail.
Okay, Dr. Hansland.
And the meeting is recorded as well, so that they're all online.
Okay, happy to adopt the minute. Thank you. Next agenda item, please.
Thank you. The minutes, please, the committee minutes, so the operations committee of the 26th of August. It's there for those members who are in attendance. We're happy to approve that minute. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Next
sorry,
agenda item.
sorry,
please.
Councillor Sorry.
Sorry, Chair. Just in relation to the transport, like the school transport, there were discussion on in relation to Glasgow. I didn't see that in the minutes. It was just focusing on another council, but just for accuracy, I know that it is mentioned in probably in the recording. But when I was reading the school transport, there was no mention of concern in relation to Glasgow City Council or transport in Glasgow for school children, and it just mentioned North Lanarkshire Council. I just wanted to see if that was accurate for a minute.
So I'll happily add that it was a different issue in Glasgow. It was as to ESN, it wasn't any mainstream school. So I'll happily add that there was a conversation about Glasgow ESN, which is not just on the way.
Thank you so much.
Personnel committee of the 26th of August. Are we happy to open that as an active minute?
Thank you. Next agenda item.
Strategy and programmes were issued earlier this week. Are we happy to accept them as an active minute? Yeah. Thank you.
Next agenda item.
Finally, audit standards were issued this week. Are we happy to accept it as an active minute? Thank you. Thank you.
Next agenda item.
Next agenda items are item 5, and it's an update of the partnership. As often happens when there's been a local government election, sometimes it takes a few meetings for the membership to stabilise a wee bit. So we've had a number of changes advised to council and obviously replacements. So welcome to those replacement members who are with us today. Perhaps more so is obviously the issue of appointed members. We've discussed appointed members previously. When we last went out with the public appointments process, we didn't get anyone in the healthcare sector. So as we had to do in the past, which is to try and identify somebody, and using Dave Johnson as a link in to try and do that. We identified Christy Owen, who is the head of planning and development in NHS Lanarkshire, who was expressed an interest. I put some details into Kirsty's background, and Kirsty's actually sitting as an observer today. Kirsty brings a lot of experience into a transport from an NHS and healthcare. So we're looking for the partnership to approve that appointment, and then the CPD of the minister to that appointment as well. So we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chair, and I look forward to the contributions of Kirsty. And I just wanted to ask for clarification then if all 9 appointed members are currently filled positions.
We don't have now, we require statute to have between 7 and 9. When we last went to public appointment process, we went out to fill all of them. There wasn't sufficient candidates in terms of votes to come forward at that point. We are within the statutory process at the moment. Obviously, a number of changes happened. We'll have the start of the public appointment process. Now, there have been some changes made to the public appointment process, and I think after this meeting this week, which is we previously used the Office of Public Appointments to do this, and we have been advised that we were allowed to do that. They've changed their process as well. So I need to think about how we actually do the whole process. It'll still be a public recruitment exercise, which is how we actually do that. But as soon as we have one additional vacancy, we can get to the recruitment process to do that.
To say that, I hope, sorry, Chair, just to follow up very quickly, look forward to all of the positions on the external appointments being filled, as Matt said there, from all the external expertise around us. So yeah, look forward to that process.
Happy to approve this appointment?
Yeah.
Okay, great. The next agenda item, please.
Thanks, Chair. Actually, so SPT's annual pension 2021-22. The council went through the normal process for an election year, slight change in election year. So
They were approved for submission to extend audit by the partnership in June. And the accounts have since been audited by assets who have expressed an opinion that the accounts represent a true and fair view of the partnership's financial affairs. There was a late adjustment to the accounts, which is detailed in second 2 in the background there, relating to infrastructure assets, which is a Scottish-wide issue for all the Scotland back in the UK. The adjustment is required was quickly implemented and audited as well, thanks to the assets for that, allowing us to stay on time and on track for the normal timetable. It resulted only in presentation of policy changes and other changes back in the bottom line changes at all. The accounts have since been to audit standards for scrutiny, the last audit standards committee, and they agree that they should be submitted to the budget for approval. And so beyond that, there are no specific issues that I was raising in the accounts at all. So if I can ask the partnership to approve the signing of the financial statements for the 31st of March, approve today. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just maybe, obviously, this report is very much with some artifact in terms of where we have been for last year. I'm just wondering, you really ask one for the creation for the last domain. I'm just trying to kind of capture in terms of the finances as we go forward in relation to SPT and its ability to carry out and about the services that we want to do and look to do.
I think one of the answers is going to be that it's full challenges as for all the authorities for all members of the regulations. We'll be bringing forth an updated advisory to the long-term financial strategy by the budget this year. So we'll cover all the different issues that are out there in terms of wage inflation, fuel prices, electricity prices, longer term views, pensions, etc. Those will all come as part of the long-term financial strategy. So in terms of last year, we managed with the measures we implemented to get through the year successfully. I anticipate that will be the case again in 22-23. The challenges are they are building and are building. Say that will be possible through the partnerships part of the process.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Happy to agree? Agree. Okay. Next agenda item, please.
Thanks very much. This is the annual report. It goes with the last set of financial statements. The issue of this is all delivered by comments in July. This is effectively a snapshot report of all of the work that SPT does or did in 21-22 and reflects the expenditure as well. But clearly it can't capture everything. So it's intended to capture the scale of activity of the biggest and the volume of work that we have to do with what is relatively small resources as part of that process. We are required to produce an annual report and this I think it reflects very well the hard work and the effort that's put in by all of the SPT staff, particularly during the pandemic, when we were operating with different arrangements and changing circumstances throughout. So the report is here, I'm sure all members have read it, but as I say, we issued it in July and then it's into any point to take on board. So we're seeking a partnership agreement to the report this morning, which would then be issued to the Minister for Transport and all the stakeholders to demonstrate the value of the work that SPT actually undertake, which sometimes a lot of which is unseen and stuff that you do every single day. So happy to take comments on it.
Many thanks, Chair. I mean, although you say this highlight report, I'm actually really pleased that two of the examples you've used are in my council wards, just a chance. First one being the White Carpet Bridge, which Councillor Wilson came along and opened for us some point last year. Can't remember exactly when, but that's with
Deputy Provost.
With Councillor McGoon, who's the other board member for the area, Deputy Provost. A bridge had been shut since the mid-90s and it really disconnected to the areas with local connections. So it was really good to see that back up and running. But more importantly was pedestrian crossings installed, particularly the ones in Sandy Road. The Sandy Road, don't focus too much locally, it's home to the route for 2 primary schools and 2 secondary schools. And the challenges we had recruiting school crossing patrols was proven that we couldn't man the crossings we should. The these traffic lights have made a huge difference, particularly for myself as I now walk my travel to Primary 1 every day along Sandy Road, and you can see the difference. Although we still have some school crossing patrols, actual safety and that will stretch the road to improve. It's But, and I suppose from my point of view, always the Renfrewshire, a bit of perception about where the money for the SPT goes. We've had this conversation, the perception is everything. It's really good that I've got concrete examples to take back to constituents, say actually, this is the SPT money, because a lot of it, people maybe assume it's local authority funded, but it is, I suppose, in a sense. However, it's SPT that's leading the project, so I just wanted to welcome both of those.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Other questions? Alan? Yeah, maybe following more a comment around a question if you don't mind, and it's just the council part to makes the comment very well insofar as that, you know, what's captured in terms of the Renfrewshire and here. It's very much a snapshot. Obviously, we've got our local reports for each local authority, which goes, I think, very much more into depth in terms of the activities that are taking place in each local authority. And indeed, Bruce, that's complete, and that's been doing the rounds in terms of each local authority. So colleagues have seen that, which should make sure that they not just use it and access it, but dare I say to share it with their colleagues within their respective local councils, just to try and highlight the work that's been done by SPT on behalf of local government. And I think as well, just two points just to highlight, I think for me is that basically SPT is the transport wing of the local authorities, because in so many cases, for so many local authorities, the transport wings within the governments are depleted because of much of the decision making within government. And the other thing is that as I said before, the local reports. So I'm just saying that just our colleagues just to basically use the local reports and to encourage it. But it just shows you what the SPT can do with the limited resources in each local authority. And I just wish to emphasise that point in terms of the value for money, in terms of what the organisation does on behalf of the government. Kind of exactly the point I was trying to get to was the issue about projects and local government. Obviously, one of the things that kind of comes up quite a lot, and I don't know if any officers can be able to comment, is the fact that sometimes in terms of projects getting delivered locally, there is a challenge because of there's been the COVID, so the resources and time, effort has been diverted to other areas, which is entirely understandable. But even before COVID, there was pressures there in terms of councils being able to deliver projects that came forward to the SPT and looking for match funding in terms of projects. So whilst this is a good report in terms of outcomes and all the rest of it, I don't think it should in any way underestimate the challenges that local government have insofar as good projects, but being able to be in a position to actually deliver them because there is a problem in terms of resources.
The officers.
The only thing I would add is to concur, clearly we need to work very closely with all the councils within our area, particularly on capital projects, but not only on capital projects, on a whole range of different initiatives and projects. And you're right that even before the pandemic, there was a skills resource issue in some councils, which makes delivery sometimes very difficult. We all work very hard together to do the best we can, but sometimes it is difficult. And actually, speaking with like Transport Scotland, it's acknowledged there is a transport skills issue generally across the UK. So that's something that we have to discuss about how do we address that to try and bring more skills into local government. And it's not just local government that's right. It's absolutely correct.
Thank you.
No, I just wanted to say I think it's a very good report. There's an awful lot of hard work that goes into producing something like this. So I think congratulations to all the staff involved. I think it gives the right overview. It gives a good flavour. As you say, you can't do everything, but it gives a good flavour. It's got all the right statistics in there. And I think anybody who wants to know what SPT does can read this report, and then they will know what SPT does. The one query I have, it's not really anything to do with altering this, but it was on page 156, talking about the antisocial behaviour and saying always be reported to Scotland. I don't really know what the legal situation is, but it's slightly different. But stores will often say regarding shoplifting, we will always prosecute. And I wonder if in terms of our staff, knowing that we have their backs, that we don't think it's acceptable for them to be subjected, should we, rather than just saying be reported, maybe it's not possible legally, some of you may know, is it possible to say, we will always prosecute when our staff receive physical or verbal abuse?
We have, all of our sites, statements, posters up there saying we take this zero tolerance approach.
Yeah.
However, not our position to determine where something is once it's reported. At that point, we can only, and thereafter, it's within the whole others.
Yeah. Right.
So we have quite clear statements on our sites saying take this zero tolerance.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just kind of from the, what does that mean? In terms of how the follow through, if you like.
We will, when we get feedback,
Yeah.
we will feed that back to staff to make sure that they know that we take this seriously.
Yeah.
But sometimes you're dependent on this school to feedback to all.
No, that's right.
Okay, any other points? Okay, Captain Booth.
Agreed.
Please.
Sure, agenda item 8 is to bring to the partnership an interim talking plan. So members who were previously on the elections, which familiar with how we have told our business plan cycle, etc. So what we are trying to do here is link the RTS and the delivery plans with the corporate plan, the plan that we as a senior team are responsible for delivering. And we've gone through a process that says we need to produce a plan that makes that link a bit clearer and a bit of clarity for our own staff as well as external about who's responsible for what community. Clearly, I'm clearly responsible for all of it. However, there are 4 pillars of responsibility, and within those 4 pillars of responsibility, Neil and Stapleton and Bruce and their respective teams, we have identified clear deliverables. What we're saying to you in our corporate plan is that these are our clear deliverables for the next 18 months. This is what, as a challenge that we've been set out, this is what we are going to deliver. We put them in the back. And it's obviously an interim plan because the RTS is not yet included. And as soon as the RTS is included, we're going to update it to make it into a 5-year plan, longer term, that will then go to our long-term plan as well. So it's bringing all the respective plans together in one place, so members can see what we are aiming to achieve. So what we've endeavoured to do is from a senior team, to make it clear what we're going to be setting out to do over the next 18 months. We will be delivering a number of KPIs that they will fall out of the RTS, as well as they will be implemented and absorbed within the next instance. And it's important that we can show that we are delivering to you, which we know we do, but we tend to do that by reports too. We want to try and get together more collectively. So we will be measuring our successes and we'll be measuring our deliveries as we move forward in a bit more than the how many passengers we have and how many bus stops we have. So a wee bit more. So it's just realigning some of our corporate business planning processes and our as I say, looking at with all of our other strategies. There are a wealth of other strategies, the digital strategy, the procurement strategy, the HR strategies, and bringing them together into one place in a snapshot. So that's the intent and the purpose for it, and it will be shared with all staff as well as our board, so that staff can see what we're all trying to achieve. So happy to take questions on it, Chair. It's intended to assist members to understand what youth is going to determine. Follow your needs, what our priorities are going to be for the next 18 months. We'll happy to take questions.
Any questions for the board?
Chair, and it's really good to see the ambition in terms of corporate strategy, and thank you for the report. Just wanted to ask about the working in partnership section, and it is really encouraging to see the extent of engagement that does occur, of course, and the conversations that do happen. But I suppose from being a board member, it's not always clear what conversations are happening and what the outcomes of those are. And I'm not asking, I don't think that it's appropriate to be involved in every minute detail of that. But I think as a partnership, it could be helpful to have a bit more of an understanding of some of that, just to understand how to more effectively you know, get involved at the right moments, etc. So I don't know if there's any means by which that can be shared with the partnership, not necessarily at a partnership board meeting, a public board meeting, but if there's any mechanism by which the partnership members can be kept more abreast of conversations happening and where sticking points might be, etc. Because I do think that in the kind of the openness and transparency and understanding of a lot of these issues is really important for us, and often quite a barrier to understanding the fuller context of things, which of course is very complicated. Complex.
It's a valid question. It's very difficult. There are conversations going every single day with the partners, and therefore that's the difficulty. It's the scale, the breadth of the work that is engaged in. And if I was to take my diary, this was alone, it's been with the chambers, it's been with a Master City Council, it's been with ATP, you know, it's that, it's like, you know, and that's replicated right across the senior team and beyond. So it's difficult to bring that scale of activity into one place. I think what members will get value from is understanding a bit more about how we develop some of those conversations. So for instance, there was a conversation at the Personnel Committee about the Strategic Safer Transport Group, which is a senior level group, myself, ATP, ScotRail, Scottish Government, and one or two others. And that's a key issue. So at some stage there will be a paper on the output of that as it develops, but it's too early to actually come forward because it's currently evolving and developing. So there will be papers that will appear at the right time, and there will be times when we will be seeking support from specific members to perhaps unblock things, and that's maybe where those conversations start to form. It's more of a learning curve, I think, as we go forward. So we'll consider how we actually make you maybe more aware of the more strategic issues. But that tends to be through the papers that we present to you. So for instance, the metro paper, etc., that we had to the SPT, that's about those conversations and the parties involved, or about the bus partnership meetings, about the membership of partnership involved. So it tends to be through the reports, but more than happy to have a conversation about how we could, without keep you appraised of the key issues on some of those issues, without members becoming involved in the operational aspects, which is where that strategic and operational issue has to stay a distinct difference. So I'll give that some thought, and maybe we can have a chat at some stage.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay.
Yes, at page 176, I realise that the list of stakeholders isn't in any order of priority or anything like that, but I just think it's a bit unfortunate that you've got public and passengers right at the bottom. I was wondering, I mean, I know we're doing consultation at a very high level on things like the regional transport strategy, but I was wondering if you could summarise how SPT engages with passengers and the public.
So the fact that it was is to do with graphic design and not to do with priority in any shape or form. We actually undertake a lot of consultation which involves the public and passengers. So for instance, we engage with Passenger Focus, which is the passenger group. We engage with bus users, a group that I can't remember the name of, the CPT. We engage with all of them as representatives of the public. We also, on occasion, will attend public meetings. So, for instance, the 1-on-1, the 1-on-2, we will engage at that level. It's very difficult because of the scale of the activity, but we do engage at community levels, at community planning level. We're involved in all the 12 community planning. We will engage at specific project levels, and again with the specific other stakeholders who are engaging with much more at local level, the healthcare sector, etc. So we do it through a number of forums. It's very difficult for SPT, with the resource that we have, to actually cover every single thing. That just isn't possible. We need some extra staff to do that. But we do on targeted areas, and we do it through other groups who are representing passengers and the public. So that's how we would engage with those groups.
Thank you.
So given numbers or on page 176, I just noticed that councillors not mentioned the kind of engagement. I think probably it's under local authorities, but I just want to point out that councillors not mentioned there.
Well, it's incorporated within county authorities.
Around the table.
Yeah.
No. Any other questions? No, questions.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back in on the back of the last question there about the passenger groups. I just wondered if it might be helpful to know, fully what that stakeholder group looks like, if it's possible to share that with members who are the passenger groups that we are routinely engaging with, because just out of interest, it would be helpful.
Yeah, I know we engage with many passenger groups that cover a whole suite of things, as some that I've mentioned, but we also engage with people like Max, the equality groups, a number of equality groups, Age Scotland, Racial Concerns are called, a whole suite of different passenger groups representing different sectors of the public. So we're happy to put something together.
That's great, thank you.
Other questions? I'll take it. Great, thank you. What's the date, please?
Just we saw big photos for the purpose of the reports to inform the partnership and our plans to put it Sundays across the next month or so. We have 2 days confirmed before Christmas, and those are the 6th of November and the 13th of November, and all the following next year. These closures will assist with tunnel installation work, platform strengthening, and possibly doing some trade testing towards the middle of next year. A Sunday shutdown gives our contractors around 7 normal night shifts, and therefore the good efficiency and safety benefits for us in doing this. As far as our customers are concerned, we're in the process of obtaining quotes for bus replacement services, both a couple of shuttle services, and also run the full circle replacements as well. Staff will mainly be required to assist regulation of the replacement services that are training, etc. in these. As regards problems, we have put problems out to the public, and will continue to do so for both today and to take any further.
Yeah, before I open up for the questions, just the Scottish Transport Awards last night. Congratulations, Anthony, we did receive a highlight commendable for SPT.
Well done.
That's all money. I can't help me, it's under. Should go.
No, Chair, I can't let that go without thanking the staff. Yes. The staff across the last 2 years, not just the last year, have been absolutely amazing. Thanks for every single one.
Thanks, Chair. It's just when you mentioned bus replacement services, and given the conversation we had in the last operations committee about securing drivers for school routes, what challenges do we think we have of securing sufficient drivers to cover these replacement services and these facilities that we're talking about?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Parsons. So that's the reason, that's the reason we're looking for 2 potential solutions. One is full circle replacement, and the other is to cover 2 real key shuttle routes for us, which will be Government Market to Service Hospital, and also the city centre to West End. And the case will come up against that particular problem. Tender will go out next week, and we'll get tender across to see what we can do once we get asked back.
Other questions?
Yeah, share everybody's congratulations to Anthony and the team. Slightly diverse question is in relation to, obviously we're very keen to kind of make sure that the subway on this of colleagues and east in terms of the trams, in terms of access, in terms of the 22 and the 22s, and just wondering, did we get any feedback on that?
Yes, I continue campaigning for allowing SPT access to the under 22 scheme. To date, I'm successful. George, Trans, myself, continuing this campaign. What we have got, we had a meeting this week with the Minister and ourselves, and also there has been a commitment, we will review it after the review. So that's the first time we've managed to get committed to that. So, which is a step forward, so it's a small step. But what we are doing is providing them information frequently about what our passenger numbers in that group are doing now. Actually, at the moment, our passenger numbers in that group have not changed. which is quite surprising. But I think it's a reflection, it's a kind of hand-in-hand issue with the number of cars that have actually been taken up. So the number of cars across Scotland, I think, is over 50% now. So there's a national campaign to increase that number underway just now. And again, the universities have just gone back, and that's a period of time for us to see whether there's any kind of spike. You normally get a traditional spike at that point. But the point has been made to Transport Scotland, not just about the students and the young people today. It's about if we don't get them into the subway at the moment, and it shouldn't be a contest between the subway and bus. If we don't get them into the subway at this stage, we've lost them potentially forever, and that's the issue. So there has been a conversation with Transport Scotland officials about how are they going to monitor this. And I'm waiting to hear some feedback.
I apologise for maybe kind of divert from the point. It's very, the key thing, obviously, it's subway and the use of and accessibility. And I agree entirely with the Chief Executive that, it's not going with the transport. It's integration, old-fashioned word, but it's very, very important. And, I think, obviously, the fact that it's going to be reviewed, I guess it's one to put in the diary, and we'll visit that in this time, because I think it is important that we make sure that the subway, whilst it's very much within the Glasgow City Council colleagues who represent our local authorities, value the subway in terms of its economic and value to the wider region type thing. So that's good news insofar as going to be reviewed, albeit in this time. Again, it's one for the diary. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor
Lawson.
Oh, hi, good morning. My apologies that I'm actually substituted in today, so I'm not familiar with much of the protocol and in and around. I have obviously revised, had a thorough look at some of the aspects of the report. Really quite heartened in and around some of the funding that's going into subsidised community transportation. Just a quick question, if someone could possibly furnish me with a wee bit more insight to this one. It's particularly vulnerable communities that are in isolation just now, particularly communities that are suffering in and around this cost of living crisis and high levels of vulnerability and poverty in and around some of our areas. I'm just keen to understand the best way of accessing the current fund that may be available to, some of the initiatives for. We do have My Bus, but I'm particularly noticed that a lot of communities have the equivalent of the My Bus that runs through communities, especially the electric versions of these buses. Can somebody give me a wee bit of detail on any initiatives that are running in their communities just now?
Yeah, can I just ask you, which agenda item are you referring to?
Oh, sorry, I was just skimming through. The report in itself, and I had, we were talking about the support within the communities. The initiatives that you have just now with My Bus and some of the projects that have been funded within the last financial year.
That's which agenda item you're on.
Sorry, I'd need to go back. No, it was the one that you were speaking to just now. The current agenda. Yeah.
Talking about the subway?
No, sorry, I've obviously missed out on that part. You've moved on to the next part. If you leave it with me just now, it's okay. I can come back and email in and around it. That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
I had a question, but I'm kind of moved now.
Councillor Reid, then yourself, then Councillor Mills.
It's not. Anthony, I'm kind of thinking of what they did with the low level closure with ScotRail in terms of your own closure. If things don't go well with bus operators, and I'm also thinking more so when you come to January, February closures, when your numbers might be slightly lower than your Christmas shopper period. Is there a potential busy points then that you referred to, is to tie in with an operator of a bus service and allow them to use the route ticket on the gap filling? Because that's kind of what ended up happening on most of the service when ScotRail closed the service. Is it potentially better to use the existing local services at the busy spots? That's my question, rather than rely on coaches that might not be used.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we can certainly look at that. I think the first thing is to see if we get back to the tenders and do that on bus colleagues. The only thing I would say about using the solitary ticket is that currently the plans are locked at the stations open on the day, which means that somebody could buy a day ticket at that point. They're going to operate a bus service which will be free to solitary users. So that would give a complexity in that for them to use that, but certainly an option if people get the returns we're looking for.
Okay, what's that?
Yeah, it was just around the same kind of question, but the 10 days, so I can't find where I was, but the people, but the 10 days that the subway will be closed, during that like 6 months period, is that advertised to the public that, you know, there are closures and the transport will be affected on those days?
Yes, absolutely. So we've advertised the 2 days pre-Christmas, the November dates we're talking about. We do have dates in mind into next year. We'll release those dates and closer to the first 2 days. We're deliberately avoiding Christmas shopping and Christmas light switch ons, things like that. And Rangers games, we have also avoided as well. We will supplement that with a bus service, which is more land consumed. So we'll be very careful in planning. The contractors know that those dates may change if something changes, particularly with football and games or dates. And also the tender we're putting out for the bus replacement service around the dates into next year may change. But we will make sure that everybody's got all sorts of volunteers and everything. And on the days of the post, we'll have people at the stations to meet people. That's what I
Thank you.
It was on STV last week, so I think the media coverage.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment on the discussion that was just a bit earlier on the engagement with Transport Scotland about the impact of 3 buses for under 22s, the impact on SPT and on the subway. I think it's really encouraging that kind of intense dialogue is taking place, because I think there's a really good case to be made for the subway to be made a free option for passengers, young passengers in the first instance potentially, and the impact on the public sector, if you like, with SPT being greater in a negative sense than on the private sector is not really a position that many people can agree is an acceptable one. So really keen to see the progress with the discussions with Transport Scotland on that, and hopefully a case to be made for more funding there. So really interesting. Then I just wanted to ask, I think I might have already asked this, but I just wanted to double check that there will be no impact on staff pay, for example, and also staff holiday entitlement as a result of the changes to closures for the next 6 months.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Mills. You did ask that, and people have applied initially to it, and confirmed that we will impact on staff. We'll be given all in do duties on those type of days. It's around 39 staff, and will be the majority of those to do regulation of bus services. But that's not required government training, we've got a lot of training, courses in line, the customer service, change management type training. But that's not possible with the things that can do so. So we're quite happy we can utilise the staff, and there'll be no impact on the pensions, wages, holidays, anything like that.
Well done. Other questions? Okay. You report. Yes. Next agenda, please.
Thanks, Chair. Next agenda item is an update on the Transport Scotland 2019 Act. It's specifically the issue of regulations and information related to the provisions on affordability of health services. Chair, the report, I won't expand further the reports to other members today, just a couple highlights we to point out from the report. This legislation is unique to Scotland within the UK, and it allows the provision for establishing of new municipal bus companies in Scotland. The details are provided here following the publication of the regulations and guidance by Transport Scotland on the 24th of June this year. I should just highlight here, they only refer to local authority run bus services, they don't refer to the other provisions within the Act, specifically bus service improvement partnerships and franchise, which we understand are due to be published in 2023. Another thing to highlight here was that SPT, due to the powers that we hold as being a form of public transport executive, we already hold the powers to serve and establish municipal bus companies should we desire to do so. And again, to highlight what's been published by Transport information, to the regulations, not guidance in terms of that. The information data itself, we provided by page 1 through 4, the key points of that. Note there's also a link to the information that's been published within the report. Really provides some detail in terms of the legal background to local authorities and relevant RTPs who wish to take forward this legislation. There is reference to the relevant general policies of the transport authorities taking this forward. There's some information in terms of the specifics of that local authorities and others would have to consider, such as having PSV operator's licence, following the respective legislation across the branch there. There has been a couple of things I would highlight. Some of the ministers works in this, and I'll do that verbatim. I would encourage all of the transport authorities to consider using this power and the full range of tools that are available to them under the Act. We, as detailed in the report, we're expecting an additional community bus fund from the Scottish Government, which would have an allowance in there to take forward consideration of that. We understand that has been paused at present. We're waiting for further information on that. The report also touches, and you'll see members on the work that we've done in this area through we've got consultancy, etc. Working with Glasgow City Council to consider the specific options under the Act, including municipal operation. And the details of that are provided in there. Highlights being, yes, you can establish one. It would be taking the order of 12 to 18 months from the feedback from consultants. Importantly, all of the risks and costs would then rest with respect to local transport authorities. And also in the longer term, a local authority could be achieved via franchise model or via acquisition. And the suggestion from the consultants with that may be in the order of £200 million cost. It would take approximately 7 years to establish. So given us some feedback there in that regard. In terms of how we take this forward, as we reported to the committee previously, we would consider all of the options under the 2019 Act through the development of the regional transport strategy and development of the regional bus strategy thereafter. Again, worth highlighting that we've only just seen information, not guidance. We've now got the regulation in terms of one part of the Act, and we await the details, guidance on the other parts of the Act, and we'll consider in due course. Again, just to reiterate, alongside those considerations will be the funding and finance that would be required should we decide to take forward any of these options, and that will be looked at in detail through that exercise. So just to conclude here, I think it's helpful to now see the regulations a number of years after the Act was passed. We await further details and other provisions in due course, and we'll be taking this forward through the development of the RTF. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Before we open up for questions, I hope that people are actually reading the report and realise it's up to councils. If they want a public transport system, then obviously there's money needs to come on the back of that. Councils have got to receive that. And nobody as yet has approached us in relation to this. As somebody who's very supportive of a public transport system owned by the public and always have been, support with that. It's disappointing that no money has came in the back of it, any statements made in relation to everything here. So I just want to make that clear for myself and the partnership. It's very frustrating for people to say what you can do and then really don't give you the tools to do that. So we can't force councils to do what they can't do, some because they don't have money, but we will be there to help them if circumstances change and the government actually come up with some money.
I'm working to loan share because what we're going to say is going to be a bit of a moan. I suppose I've got a direct question at the end, but like see, I'm going to say first, I totally agree with what you've said there. It is up to local authorities, but we've heard already we no longer retain the expertise required at the local authority level to do this, and that's not to, I'm not putting down the staff that are still there. Most of them probably do have the expertise, they don't have the time because local authorities are asking them to do so much, and it's one of the, I suppose, the departments that's been hollowed out over the years because it's not quite public facing and it's politically acceptable to lay these staff off and make up our funding. I mean, my own full council yesterday, we were talking about 35 million shortfall. So do you think then Shire Council at any point in the next couple of years is going to be looking to set up its own bus service? I've got news for you, they simply can't afford to do it, which was really disappointing. And that brings me on to my main one is that I can't believe we've still not got all the regulations following this act. It just didn't make any sense to me. And I could probably just about swallow that if the PR campaign about the act and the powers being the local authority wasn't in full swing, because it puts pressure on us as councillors to then respond to people, because quite rightly they think it's all singing, all dancing, ready to go, and you say, well, actually it's not, just because that's what you've seen on. So I suppose that's my one. The question I'm going to is the letter you wrote the Transport Minister probably towards the end of June, if I remember correctly, it was brief and to the point, which I was very pleased to see. If we had any response to that, even in the negative, at least some kind of acknowledgement of the concerns we're raising.
And rather than mine was last chief executive, because mine wouldn't be flowing.
Chair. There was a number of letters, so I assume you're talking about one that referenced no powers about.
Exactly.
Yes, we've not had a formal response. I have chased on the number. I continue to chase.
Thank you.
We have a meeting with the dining hall. That's quite right in November.
I do feel there is a major communication issue here with the public. Not quite sure who should be leading it, but given that we represent 12 local authorities, maybe SPT should be leading it. I have had several people say to me, because of the partial publicity this has received, that local authorities can set up their own bus services now. And generally it's people who know absolutely nothing about the costs of running any sort of transport service. So that's easy. Why aren't local authorities doing it? We don't need all these private companies running. Local authorities can do it now. They can just run all the public bus services. Problem solved. They'll have all the services running everywhere we want to stop. You know, every community that wants a bus service, they'll get us up the bus service because we can get it back under public control and we know what to do. Now, you know, we all know what is involved in trying to run a bus service. It's a bloody expensive thing to do. And, you know, and with the resources that local government has now, most local authorities, that's a pipe dream, the idea that they will just be able to suddenly, tomorrow, start running public bus services. So, you know, there really is a communication issue with the public here. And, you know, we need to get our best PR people onto it. I think we just need to do much more in terms of really setting out this is what is involved in running a bus service from A to B. You know, keep it in simple terms. You know, and this is why. And most bus services do not make money. They have to be subsidised to start with. You know, the idea that you can rake in loads of money from running bus services to every rural community all over the west of Scotland is just a nonsense. So we really do need a proper public information campaign that really makes it clear what is involved in running bus services, how difficult it is, how expensive it is, and the sort of difficult trade-offs you need to make between does one area get a bus service and another area doesn't. You know, everybody wants express services. Everybody wants to go from where they want to go A, straight the way to B. And I remember years ago when I worked at the airport, a councillor saying to me, the problem is, he said, we can arrange to try and get an express bus service put on And he said, before you know where you are, everybody along the route is saying, but I want it to stop here, 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 and here. You no longer have an express bus service that, you know, people will use. It's so slow and cumbersome that, you know, because it has to stop at every community. That sort of thing. So, you know, there is a massive education job to be done here with the public about what is involved, the complexity and the expense of running a public bus service. And I think we are the group that has to start leading the charge on that and really getting stuff out there and getting people educated about it. I'll come on all those now.
I think also consideration needs to be given to the relationship with the existing bus companies. I mean, is a council expected to set up in competition with all the existing services? Or are you actually going to work with the existing operators under some framework or franchise or another? Bear in mind, the cost of acquiring a fleet of buses and probably more difficult acquiring a suitable depot and all that sort of thing. And I think it'll be quite interesting. Local authorities might find it very difficult competing in, over a sustained period with existing services.
Councillor Thompson. And Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to come in because obviously I'm a rural councillor myself. Bus services are controlled by one bus service. For me, the news of this act was music to my ears, thinking we have an opportunity for local authorities to do something. I have to echo what the Chair said, that we're getting powers without the resources to do anything about it. Makes great headlines, but doesn't help people that need the bus services. I mean, in an area like South Ayrshire, where the buses cost 3 times as much as it costs in Glasgow to go from A to B, it's a real struggle to get competition in, because when the competition comes in, the current franchise prices it out, and that's where the cost comes in. They can undercut the other companies coming in who are trying to make a fledgling business work, and I think that if SPT can do something to mitigate that, then bus services might be better than public services. But again, I'm talking from South Ayrshire. Good point.
Councillor Wilson. Councillor Mills.
Yeah, I'd just like to agree with what Greg was saying. The intention of the Act is very much the council to take over lock, stock and barrel the bus services in their geographical area. And the problem with that is you need to give the councils money to take over the bus service. And that money, as been said before, is frankly currently not available, Greg.
And of course, you assume that the existing operators of bus service are going to transfer it to the council.
Councillor Mills.
Thank you, Chair. For me, aside from the actual financial issue for councils, I'm kind of quite interested in understanding what the risk is to SPT for councils all of a sudden taking on this role as well. Whereas surely we have that role, that we could have that role. We already have the powers that was outlined here under the previous Act to operate our own bus services. Obviously, the majority of our activity around buses is contracting out to private companies, for example, who then take the profits as a result. Why, the question therefore for me is, why are we not doing more of that? And is there an opportunity to do so? And is there a risk from our point of view for the councils all of a sudden coming into the mix here? And are we making any statements about that? And for me also, it's about, there's a real lack of understanding there for me in terms of public ownership, because councils operating bus services is public ownership, but SPT operating bus services for the benefit of people surely is public ownership too, which I think a lot of people might not understand. Just to expand very, very quickly, the council's taking on this role, surely from our own objectives as SPT to create a world-class transport system that's integrated and affordable is at risk, because we're fragmenting a system that's already fragmented even more by adding somebody else into that mix of operators. So I suppose, given that what appears to be quite significant risks to SPT, what are we doing to step up and try and take on more of that responsibility ourselves from the private operators now that we have legislation, and in fact we already have had the powers to do so?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. That's the question. I think it just included in both the risks, I think, apply equally to whether it's a local authority decides to run that notion to SPT, who's made up of local authorities. So the supply. Equally, what's come to mind was you're asking questions. Actually, there's a live example of the risks that are involved, which is COVID, and we've seen over £500 million injected from the state and our services to keep them operating during the COVID period. So it's quite an extreme example, but it gives you an idea of the challenge that's faced and the risk that lies with the state. Again, in terms of a municipal operation, that risk in some respects is passed back to local authorities and SPT as a group of that. Question around mix of operators, yeah, absolutely. We have a live example of a municipal operator in Scotland, Lothian Buses, who've been that through many, many years, and to compete in a regulated competitive market with a number of other companies in that area. So we have that. And again, that's why we put the details of the report that needs to be really considered, how you do that. Here's some examples of competitive behaviour that we see in the marketplace of new firms entering, either community transport, maybe others, and the competitive reaction we see to that. So that's something we need to bear in mind in terms of the risks, responsibilities, costs, and challenges in that space.
Can I just come back in very briefly on the back of that?
Very briefly, things are working on like.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I just appreciate that. And I would just say that for me, there really is a case to be made for SPT taking that mantle forward and not simply allowing the councils to take on a bizarre kind of new role here, and that surely there's a huge opportunity for SPT and the passengers and the public in terms of profits being reinvested back into sustainable transport as through SPT as a vehicle, rather than through the private operators who of course have their own shareholders to appease as well. So yeah, I think a really good case to be made in terms of us pushing for more of our own operations as opposed to sitting back and letting other people take it forward.
But just to respond, the key challenge we have is SPT to have the finance or the funding. Two important points to take that forward. Should be choosing. So that's the kernel. That's the kernel issue. Thank you.
Okay, just online to Councillor Loughlin.
Hi. No, my apologies. I jumped the gun earlier. It was in fact item 10, but I'm having some difficulties flitting in and out here with the audio aspect. No, just really to reinforce the subsidising and for community or public services, public service vehicles, and in and around it, the perception that is out there with this legislation is that local authorities, it's just a matter of local authorities coming through and replacing bus services that have been withdrawn, because that's where I'm at just now. We have 2 services withdrawn, and the local opinion is that the local authority can just instantly replace that service. And again, the powers are there obviously, but without the resources. But it was just to kind of build on that, and I welcome the comment here today, because it have obviously it's driving through a lot of what is without a doubt comment just now in and around this problem. But I just thank you, because it has informed some of the questions that I had today in and around this topic. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Really along the lines of David, substantively answer. Taking it slightly further, has there been any internal discussion with officers as to how that could work in practical terms? Is it a case of one council in, all in? Or how do we, if we're taking it forward, take it forward if some councils want it and others don't? Or if it's councils that are taking it forward, are they simply treated as as another commercial operator? It's practical terms such as that. It may not be particularly relevant just now, because the way everybody's speaking, it's just unaffordable. But I think you need to have a level of preparedness. And just one question. I noticed here it could take up to 8 years.
We don't like them.
It's yourself, one island. Could take up to 8 years was to be able to implement a franchising or acquisitions. I'm not unsure why, if we're acquiring a company, we take it on. Not that I'm asking you to acquire anything, I'm just curious as to why.
I think the franchising that you've done quicker, just working backwards, but if you're talking about the old Strathclyde model, I mean, all the councils will always have to be involved and give their agreement for us to. I would like that system back again as well. The way to go, but that's me, but I've no money and nobody's any money. So you're absolutely right. And the Scottish Government in relation to the statements and repeat. I love these statements. The statements about cash, the statements. Go.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, in terms of internal discussion, I think the internal discussion would be, we'd like to see the guidance in relation to this legislation, because these are some of the very real questions that come. And I think until that's the case, and that's going to be a challenge there in terms of looking at that. In terms of the timescales, you're absolutely right to raise that. There may be instances perhaps with other local authorities. I know colleagues in Swiss Transit, recent Galloway area are looking at this and already have some of their own services on the road. So yes, small scale, I would say it could be established quicker. First, you can something more substantial is going to take a number of years. So that's really the key point with the consultants.
Thanks, Bill. Chief Executive, want to come in?
George wants
to. George.
Thanks, Chair. It might be of help to this discussion to just give an overview from what I'm seeing across the UK and indeed across Europe in my work. First of all, this is one of the hot topics across the UK and across Europe. Secondly, it's extremely complex. It may seem simple, it's extremely complex. And in the UK, a lot of European countries have publicly owned public transport. We don't have that system, which makes it even more complex. And there are big issues, the issue of risk of a public body going into a commercial market. There are risks. And you've got to acknowledge these risks. Timescale, I was just talking to somebody last night who was head of one of the biggest bus groups in the UK, and I talked to him about franchising, and he said it will take you at least 5 years, if not more, purely because of the legislative process, without even any objections. Now, I don't know the details of that, but it seems a long time to me, but that's the reality of the situation as we now see it, and it's expensive, extremely expensive. I don't. The issue here, with all those pushing for better bus services, better mobility, including SPT, including me personally, and other groups, is not one of policy and aims and objectives. All the right policies, from my point of view, what I can see in terms of the reports that are coming out of SPT, all the policies are there. We're not arguing about policy or change. What the difficulty is how you deliver these policies within a very complex and public stroke commercial market. And that's what people are struggling with. All the research looking at customers or citizens, however you want to call them, both those using bus services and, almost as important, those not using them, who like to use them, is they want three things. The first one, it has to be customized to their needs. And I don't mean transport needs, I mean their lifestyle needs in terms of getting to work, in terms of doing what they want to do. And secondly, it has to be of value, and that flows from the two, otherwise they're not going to use the system. And thirdly, it has to be seamless. They want end-to-end, and that's difficult to do in terms of drawing things together and ticketing. So again, we know what we want. When you look around the UK, people are trying all sorts of things. It's we're waiting on legislation emerging in Scotland, but people are trying all sorts of things. Welsh Government are looking seriously at franchising. And finally, it's extremely difficult. Manchester are looking at various things. Birmingham are looking at various things. Devon and Cornwall are looking at various things. Rural transport is always an issue in terms of this area. So I think from my point of view, it may be frustrating, but from my point of view, what the officers are currently doing, as I understand it, is looking at all of these things within this period between the legislation coming out and saying, what can we do? What do we want to do? How much will it cost? What are the risks of doing that in terms of SPT doing something, or the council's doing something? And so what can we learn from anywhere else? And is there a partnershiping model? And interesting enough, what I was hearing last night is some of the bus companies, by the way, this is not a new problem. Bus patronage has been declining long before COVID for a number of years. And so we do need to look innovatively at demand responsive systems for rural areas. We do need to look at other systems and combining other systems. And I'm sure the officers are doing that as well. So it will require a new look. And this is the period over the next few months or whatever, where we need to look at all of what's going on and just say, okay, here's the choice. This is, as councillors, as board members of SPT, this is what we'd like to do. Okay, well, these are the consequences of you doing that. Is there a partnershiping model with the private sector? It's more complex in Strathclyde area because you've got so many bus companies. How do we bring that? How do we bring that together? And so, my overview, and I don't know if it's helpful or not, is that everyone's trying to solve this problem. I think personally, Strathclyde is in a good position. A lot of the things that are going on, it's a wide area, it's a regional area, but nevertheless, it is not easy. And I think the next few months, year, is going to be really interesting in terms of delivering what we want to for the people and businesses of Strathclyde to get them to where they want to go and do what they want to do in terms of their lifestyles and in terms of the economy, in terms of the environment as well. I hope that's helpful.
Before I bring in Rosie and Councillor Mills, I think one of the things we could almost do, government could do this in legislation, is the routes. If the councils were in charge of the routes and they had to do, well, it used to be the case in the SPT, we were in charge of the routes and then the companies bid, well then, this is something we could do almost idly, immediately. I stand to be corrected. But at the moment, you've got companies who want to deliver a share to a shareholder and keep that as high as it can be. They don't spread the cost where they lose here and gain there and then give out the shares. They don't do that. They come to us for grants because they want to do away with a service and they want us to subsidise it. So they don't spread the pay to the shareholders. They just cut the route and then we come in. So that can be looked at through us controlling the routes. And if we can't control the bus companies, at least if we can get there, then at least the public will have a service and routes not be cut and shareholders maybe buy a share elsewhere if they're losing money. That's called socialism. There we go. Rosie.
As we said, this is a hot topic, isn't it? I think as a new councillor on the SPT board, I have a lot of questions and we see there's campaigners here. I have a campaign background myself, so I care about the kind of a campaign. Majority of us actually, all of us agree that we want transport to progress, but how we're going to actually deliver this. Really from kind of understanding the powers have been given, and we know that's the case. I know there's financial difficulties to how we're going to deliver that, but I see SPT personally has the expertise to do. You have the expertise to kind of lead in a way with public councils and local authorities. For me, I would like to know, of course, there's been discussion about the time scale. I would like to know the time scales exactly. We're saying, oh, it's going to be in 2030 we're going to achieve this, what kind of work is being done to achieve this? Because I think the public are not aware of what kind of work is actually being taking place. And that's why I think it's very frustrating for people, like how is this being prioritized? Is SPT actually prioritizing this? Are they listening to us? And I think we are listening, but we just need to actually have kind of clarification and information for the public to know how we are taking this work forward. Yeah, and I think that's all I wanted to say. And I know that we are in a difficult time, all of us. There's a lot of cuts and financial difficulties. But I think it's just how we're gonna make these changes possible and look into other authorities like Edinburgh, of course, are leading on publicly owned buses.
But they kept the buses.
They kept the buses, that's true. And I think it's just difficult for us how we can do that, but how can we do that? I know there's work being done, but how we can actually communicate that to the public, and who are, 5,000 people have signed a petition in Glasgow, as far as I'm aware, for better fares, cheaper fares, and publicly owned. And I think just that communication needs to go out to the public itself and say that we are doing something, and SPT is seeing us doing something about it.
Okay, Kirsty, and Anne.
Thank you, Chair. To echo that and previous comments by George Hazel, I think, the question isn't what we want, but how do we get there? I think off the back of Councillor Sally's comments there, I think as much as the public needing to know how much it's going to cost, I think we also need to understand what the long-term business case is, because it will, of course, cost us money in the short term, and it will cost the public purse in the short term, but the longer-term benefits surely can be demonstrated to be worth that short-term cost. And for example, we know that as SPT, we have the experience, we have the expertise, we have the regional transport partnership responsibility for the region. Therefore, surely we are the best place to take on this work to a greater extent, to bring forward that public benefit in the long term, starting by taking on some of the supported services, for example, one at a time, and then maybe slowly over time taking over some more of the commercial routes. Surely there's a case to be made for looking at that in detail, and if so, can we do that work and make that case for SPT to take on that greater role and bring forward that change that we know can be achieved through more public ownership, more investing back into services rather than passing over profits and routes and responsibilities to private companies, which we know have not been able to deliver what the passengers require. So I just wanted to make that last ditch attempt to ask SPT to start to take on that role, and how we get there is by looking at the detail. Can we look at the detail?
Okay, so by hand, I can just take notes in that, rather than.
My point sort of follows on from that.
There's a lot of points, really go quiet and answer, but it's points that we should maybe get into. I think I'll agree with those points as well.
We've all agreed it's very complex. We all want the same thing, much better services. My feeling is the way to go initially. We really need a kind of half-day seminar with all of us, not part of any other meeting, but a half-day seminar in which you set out the existing situation, what the costs are of the bus services, where the profit, how much profit is being made by the private sector, et cetera, in the bus service. So we get the existing situation set out, and then we say, and these are the different options we've got, and this is what it would cost. And I know that's a hell of a lot of work for the team here. I'm not saying, and maybe do it at quite high level. But I think until we all get our heads around exactly this is what the existing situation is, and these are the pros and the cons of the existing situation and where the money is going, what the costs are, then we can't really start to say, well, where do we want that money to go? And what would be a better alternative than we've got already? And then at least maybe we go back to the government at some point and say, we can do this, and this, and that's the bill for it. And then you can have much better public transport. But I think we need to start with a kind of half-day seminar almost, so that we're all on the same page in terms of understanding what we're grappling with at the moment, where we are. But that's just a suggestion. As I know it's a lot of work for the team.
Right. No, just take one of the board's points, come to the.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a couple of things, if you don't mind. I think it would be fair to say that everybody who sits around this table is campaigning for better transport. Indeed, if anybody isn't, then there's the door. Quite frankly, so let's be clear that everybody around this table and officers have had pleasure and to get to know our campaigners in their own right in that war. I guess part of the frustration that sometimes overspills into how things are proceeding quickly or slowly is obviously the thing that we kind of try to shorten with. Obviously, the points that were made by Gordon in terms of information versus guidance is quite an important thing, and also in terms of the legal process. Something that I get frustrated with, and others will get frustrated with. But I guess when we are talking about due diligence and looking at the top of dust, I'm not necessarily an advocate of doing the charge of the light brigade and posting up a financial increment against the public sector. So we need to be very, very mindful of that in terms of going forward. And what I would say as well, that obviously we're talking about legislation that came about 2019. There has been a small matter between 2019 and to more recently, and that's COVID. And that's been an absolute shock to everything, the public transport as well. So I think, we are going through the RTS, we're going through the discussions, and, we've done that through the transport for staff plan document, which I've agreed on. That was done prior to the COVID situation that's taking place. And that was about setting up the menu. The interesting thing is for some colleagues who attended the recent conference with the operators, the CPT, people may have a view about private operators or whatever, but the point being is they are giving feedback in relation to the difficulties they have as a bus industry. And it's important that we listen to what they've got to say. We don't necessarily agree with it, but the point being is they are a key partner nonetheless. And quite frankly, the bus finances and passengers are ready to fall off a cliff. So the issue about things maybe happening 7 years down the line, frustrating albeit maybe it is, maybe coming to us somewhat sooner. We mentioned this state before about the subsidies to bus operators during COVID, keep the buses operating, keep people to go to the work, key workers and so forth, and quite rightly so, about having masks. That's basic information about data, so that we can maybe make a contribution. That has not been necessarily forthcoming. And now we're at a stage come October, maybe Gordon can maybe give us an update if that's possible, in terms of the operators basically see a cliff take place. Not 7 years, but in a month's time, and we're really talking about severe challenges to services right across the board, across Scotland, but obviously in Strathclyde. So we've got my frustration, dare I say, is that people may be frustrated with SPT not necessarily being seen to do things. I think that again, the issue of communications in relation to Scottish Parliament, colleagues through there. I'm always very, very keen to try and make sure that they understand how the land lies in Strathclyde, and the chair has done that, continued that in terms of representation, in terms of SPT. But the fundamental thing is this: whatever, going through the due diligence, making sure we don't cause ourselves a legal problem, financial problem. The key thing is at some point, regardless whether you have an pension, whether it's a status quo, whether it's an in-between, or whether it's a full nationalised bus industry, the point being is this: it's going to require investment. Taking George's word for investment rather than the cost, because I do believe public transport is an asset, and an asset for health, an asset for education, everything else that comes under that umbrella. But the point being is this: I like to try and emphasise to people who may be somewhat sceptical about SPT's enthusiasm to find a solution, or not trying to find a solution. It couldn't be further from the truth. point being is we need to be very, very careful about the public sector funding, because there's not a lot about first and foremost. So thank you.
Right, I'm going to take 3 more points from members, and then I'm going to bring it back to officers. You before, because there is another meeting at 12 o'clock. I asked the commissioners members on this, with this table on that. So I'm conscious of that. So when I bring these in, the size, and then I'll bring in the 2 officers. We're chatting at the back for sure. Okay, so Councillor Hoffman.
Hi there. No, very heartened again just to hear that probably the half-day seminar to address the barriers in and around resources, public ownership, legislation. But of course, I think we need to be mindful that, you know, it's about harnessing the green energies as well. Certainly a lot of our European, if we look to where our European partners, without a doubt, these fleets are significantly electric, and then obviously with the long-term plans looking towards the hydrogen green energies as well. So I would just obviously like to just put that wee bit in there, that's, you know, something that's a major consideration in and around that debate as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Excuse me. Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with a lot of what's been said today. Certainly, going back to your original comments, Chair, about believing in public ownership, I certainly, you know, believe that's the ideal situation for our buses. I think one of the things is this past year, you know, the subways are already run by SPT. This past year, excuse me, I might get through this, or I might not. Excuse me. The railways were taken back into public ownership, so I think the buses now stand out a lot more like a sore thumb in terms of not being in public ownership, and I think that's really a reason why this issue is going to come to the fore so much more. You know, I certainly don't shy away from the various challenges that people have mentioned, and you know, I think places like Manchester are kind of used as an example and how far down the line they are, but that has taken them years and years of progress. So it's not certainly not an overnight situation. I agree about the proposal. I think it was Anne that made it about a half-day seminar, really looking and you know, drilling down into all the detail. Just in terms of though knowing where we are and knowing where we want to go, and I know there's been a lot of talk about, well, there's all these various local authorities involved in SPT, and I know earlier on, Valerie, you said that, you know, there's always conversations going on between yourself and various organisations, local authorities. I wonder if we know either formally or informally what the position is of each local authority, and I think it would be quite helpful to actually to know what their position is. Is a certain local authority 100% opposed to public ownership? Would they be willing to do it, but they want to run it? Would they be happy for SPT to run it? It'd be good to know, I think, you know, where each local authority within SPT is on this issue. Thank you.
Thanks, I mean, I'm conscious of what I'm hearing, what I'm passionate at the table, but I'm very conscious that the people who be hearing this is the government and the transport minister, and what is the scope? I've never been involved with SPT now, about requesting the transport minister to attend one of these meetings, because this is the sole item on the agenda, to hear firsthand from 12 different authorities, all saying roughly the same thing. Cross-party, by the way, as well, which has got to be a very touch call. I mean, we're all have our party loyalties here today, but listen, I'm here first and foremost to get better public transport for the constituents, and they need to hear this. They can't shy away, they can't just say there's the powers, see you later. They need to hear this firsthand about, and if we have this seminar that I've been suggested and we have a full idea of the ask, we'll up it back on the table and say, well, this is the ask, then if you want us to reduce, here's the financial ask. And I think it will be an investment, because eventually, if run properly, it won't be a drain, it will be a positive. I think it will be maybe not an income generator as such, but if run properly, the bus service doesn't have to be constantly subsidised. We can find ways of running a profitable service to a point, but that will take a long time, and it takes some serious money to begin to get everything.
So as an income generator, because there's a private sector there, too, so there's money there. Okay, the last point from a board member, and then going to bring it to the officers.
Thanks. Two points. It will require local authorities to join up. If North Ayrshire is a good example. Any journey over 10 miles links in with every other authority around about us, and everybody wants a bus to Glasgow. So every bus service and every local authority on the route will have to agree to going forward. My second point is around the regulation. I'm actually wondering, with regards to regulation and the publication of guidance, if Transport Scotland is actually that enthusiastic or that ambitious right now, and that's my question. Where are we with Transport Scotland? Because they are the body that produces the legislation. They perhaps don't have a chief executive just now, they're perhaps rudderless because they can't run ferries, but they are needing, they do have their problems, they have their ferry problems, and now they're running ScotRail. So is this one actually low priority? So my question is, where is the priority list on Transport Scotland for this one to give us guidance of when we might get the opportunity to move forward with it? Because they need to get the guidance for us to move forward.
Okay, so I'm going to bring in Gordon first, and then finish off with Thornley. Going to the IT system. Okay, go.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with Councillor May's question because it was obviously the easiest question I was I think we can't answer Transport Scotland's mission. What we point you to is the policy objective in terms of 20% reduction in car kilometres. That's going to require a load of shift on public transport. The bus is going to require that consideration. So I think it's really one for the answer. But we have. That's why we're highlighting the statements made by the Minister and also the funding positions of the staff from Scottish Government within the report. In terms of the point made about next steps and suggestion there, maybe one for Valerie to comment on, just to highlight within the report, about page 194, but stating that we're going to bring a paper to the Strategy and Programmes Committee setting out our next steps in terms of the regional bus strategy. So we will provide further information with members. We're really conscious this is only focusing one small bit of the 2019 Act within this report. Just a point around SPT's involvement and focus. Our focus is also on the passenger and how we can improve things for the passenger on the ground. And we've been part of this journey, not just since this legislation. We've been started this for many years. Members have been with us for a while to remember. So it's just worthwhile remembering that point and pushing for a change to the legislation. The previous legislation, we were the only organisation used the powers extensively and highlighted the issues with the powers at the time. So I thought it was worth making that point. The point that George makes around this, the demos are absolutely in detail here, and there's plenty of detail that's come out through the discussion today. The need for guidance and for funding and support is absolutely clear. We need to see more of that coming forward for consideration. And also just to find a pick up point around COVID, absolute sledgehammer to bus batch rates, which was declining prior to the pandemic, which was declining prior to the regulation of the bus market as well, which is important to highlight in the context. So there's key issues at the moment in terms of driver shortages, significant across the industry. There's significant issues in terms of inflationary pressures, wages, other cost pressures, fuel, etc. So absolutely, the challenges are we're not short of challenges at the moment, let's put it that way. To pick up Councillor Moyer's comment, yeah, we do expect further service cuts as the funding goes to an end. We know operators are looking at this moment and aligning services with the current network demand within that space. So yeah, not without challenges to see.
Okay, thank you. Bruce.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair. Just coming back to the point we Gordon made there, I think it is worth labouring. Back in 2010, 2011, there was no bus policy in Scotland before SPT came up with one. We came up with our 10-point plan, we took it, the partnership, we got it approved, we went to the government with it, and over a period of years, worked with them, and that culminated in the 2019 Act. It's really important to remember the history here and understand that if there's any kind of thought that SPT hasn't done anything with bus, SPT's led the way in terms of bus policy. And similarly, the regional transport strategy, really important line in the report is the third bullet point down 194, clarifies the meaning of relevant general policy. In this case, regional transport strategy. If you do not have a strong regional transport strategy that justifies making a significant change to how you deliver bus out local and nowhere, that's why we're delivering a strong regional transport strategy. That is the strongest targets we've ever set for our region, and it's the strongest policies we've ever set for an entire region. And just in the last point about what the council's view is, that's why we put the RTS consultation on board. Expect to hear back from councils. We've put some very bold and ambitious plans in our draft RTS, and we want support from councils to take some of those forward. Otherwise, some of the targets that we've set, some of the targets the government set, will be very challenging to get. So just last point, because it's Gordon's saying, we will be bringing forward the RTS consultation ongoing to the we will be bringing a paper to the SNP in November, which will outline how we do that, gives it a bit more information. Sort of keeps on doing another last point. It is important to remember, the report that we did with Sister in Glasgow City Council was the only one of its kind in Scotland, another way where SPT led the way. We were the only ones who took the act seriously and said, okay, what does this mean for us in terms of time, finance, and actual workability? So just important to remember those points, Jim.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm not going to get to it in saying, but I just think there's a couple of important points that are worth reiterating. The question about the local authority, the individual local authorities, and where they stand. Now, we all know that individual local authorities have looked at the issue of municipal bus companies in the past and seen the results and backed away from it. And it's a matter of risk, funding, finance, complexity, not having the asset base. So I think whilst we know some have walked away from it or backed off from it, others have looked informally and at this stage there simply isn't the funding to do it. I'm not saying it shouldn't be looked at, but that's the kind of informal position, and in some cases formal positions around Scotland on those issues. I think in terms of where SPT is, SPT has led the way, without reiterating everything that Bruce said, has led the way to get to this point. But the complexity of the issue, I think, is often misunderstood or ignored in terms of how difficult it is. And the issue about the 8 years that's in the report, and I'm going to say what George was saying, actually that's based on experience of other local authorities, the Manchesters, the Nexus, this one, we have to remember the Nexus, Newcastle, went through the same process and failed and spent millions doing it and years doing it. So you have to do the whole due diligence process first and robustly to ensure you don't face any kind of legal challenge. As George was saying, a bus operator was suggesting it would take 5 years without a challenge. So you need to do it correctly and robustly. And I think that is not what people want to hear. And I accept that, but it actually is a really important point. And SPT, in its position as a public authority, must and will do things correctly and robustly to get the right answers. So I just wanted to reiterate that point. We fully understand the issue, but we will always look at what the customer needs, what the passenger needs first. But we have to recognise that SPT is funded through 12 councils. So when we talk about the risks, SPT can come forward with a plan in due course for whatever those millions will be, but that will be needing to be funded. So our partners need to be part of that. They need to be part of that. They're going forward and seeking hundreds of millions of pounds. It's not something that's going to land easily on any Director of Finance's table at the moment. And having gone through that in the past to try and get £40,000 out of them is I think that the scale and the complexity of that process is clearly not misunderstood. When people suggest that SPT isn't doing enough, it's just that is a massive task and should not be underestimated. And actually, I'm sending Neil in first on that day to see that kind of delegation on that. Finally, I think the issue about some kind of workshop, and I think with members is a good idea, and we'll look at how we can put that together, just to have those kind of conversations. It will be very high level.
Yeah, I think that's fine to begin.
To kind of unpick some of those issues and how to do it. But more than happy to do that, and we will bring frequent and common papers here so that members are fully up to date. But I think everyone in the room needs to understand this is a massive task and a massive expensive exercise, which is the other issue.
Okay, thanks for that. Before we round this up, to round this up, a lot of examples used, good examples of where there are mayoral systems in cities. We don't have a mayoral system in Scotland. So really, it needs to be like for like when you're giving examples. Just in relation to, I'd like to compliment Get Glasgow Moving and the peaceful demonstration this morning. Remind me always again how we do things and listen to my emails. A good start, but anyway. Well done for that. We are listening. Okay, very frustrating for us. I know it's even more frustrating for yourself. So thank you. Okay. Right, we move on to agenda item 11.
Thank you, Chair. And relevant to the conversation we had, this is to make sure members are all aware that we are intending to place an SPT Transport Summit on the 27th of October. We've had discussion with other stakeholders about it would be a good idea to get key stakeholders together in a room to have a full and frank conversation about some issues and about developing policies in part of our aspirations as well. So the three subjects that we will be discussing will be water recovery, what's COVID, what's and climate change, the future for us. Instead of we just discussed, and obviously looking much more is environmental and where that sits within this. We have invited the minister to attend the meeting, and initially we've got acceptance, but I think there's maybe a diary issue now popped up, so we're probably going to do that. It will be held in Glasgow, and a save the date invitation has been sent out.
Did I not to us though?
No.
Open it, or what? So I'm going to take a third on that one. But we'll make sure we've all got it in your diaries by the end of the day. The intention is to have a session with speakers and allow us to have a conversation. That's really what it's about. It will be by invite only, I'm afraid, because of numbers and space. There's trying to get a venue. So we'll be moving on this as soon as it's to make members aware and to seek your support and participation in it.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking forward to attending this. I think it'll be a really interesting and positive thing to do. I just wanted to ask, if we were to send an invite list, I just wanted to ask for clarification on who the passenger groups invited are. Okay, and is there scope for any that might be missing to be included?
Space is an issue, and venues, there must be other things on in the city that we have struggled to get venues. I think we've got up to 100 at the moment. So I'll have to look at who's accepted, who's not accepted. So I don't know the answers to that.
If I can just quickly come in, I think my understanding is that Get Glasgow Moving hadn't been invited. That is my understanding, which is a concern given the vast numbers of passengers they represent across the region.
I will have a look at the list to make sure about, because I don't know who's accepted, who's not invited.
Thank you. If they aren't there, I would request that the invite is shared with them. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, we can't put 2 pints into 1 pint. Do our best. Right. Any other questions? Good. Duncan,
Sorry, it's just to clarify if substitutes will be welcome.
Yes, from members.
Okay, Councillor Thompson.
Everybody switch the mic up on me. Thank you, Chair. It's just a simple admin question. What is the timing of the summit? What time will be held? Evening, afternoon?
It's during the day, but I will make sure that when you the event comes out, it's full attention.
Thank you.
by the whole council that day, so.
Yes.
It's so easy.
That means we can't go.
I'm afraid it has been.
You're always more important.
Yeah, I will. Just stay back, but anyway. Okay, no further questions? Okay. Sorry,
So I just wanted to ask, thank you, Chair, just that we didn't actually agree with the previous paper. And I just want, I know that it was just recommending that we know the report, however, I just wanted,
You're quite right.
I just wanted to ask, is it possible to add on another thing there that asks that that a paper comes to a future partnership meeting, considering the creation of a business case? Because I just want, in the context that Glasgow City Council on Tuesday are having a committee that's approving a business study into municipal ownership, I think we need to be doing that concurrently if you're to stand in a chance of making that case that we're best placed to do that.
I think all the councillors are aware. If they were to agree such a thing, there's, and they would immediately contact us. Really, there is another meeting, so.
It's a great way to start to change programs.
No, I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just follows the section.
Okay, right, so it's going to strategies and programs anyway.
Sure. To vary, but all, not all members of Parliament, SPTs, and so I'm mindful of that, but obviously, given the interest on the said subject, that members who are not part of the also attend also. As observers.
Okay, sorry, and just to go back to item 10, we agree that?
Agreed.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Nelson. Okay, and item 12 is it, before we go to that exclusion of the public.
If anyone who's not concerned with this, the item 12 to be nice.
That's a legal thing, though.